Welcome back to the Licensure Lifeline podcast. Today is a celebration. This podcast was started 1 year ago on May 29th, and it was started as a way for me to study. I had to retake the NCE exam for new licensure in Colorado after I moved here. The NCE I had taken before was too old to be considered, so I had to retake it. And this is what I did the first time I studied for it, is I would record myself going over topics and then re-listen to the small podcast I created. And I thought, why not share the knowledge with everybody else? And 1 year later, I'm still sharing the knowledge and growing the podcast. In the spirit of growth, I am going to go over topics that I feel have been some of the more confusing topics that people have brought up, talked about, messaged me about. So beyond just reviewing a lot of these topics, I'm really hoping to clarify some of the differences, some of the uniqueness of these topics to really help people out for the test. This has been a great year. Thank you so much for sharing this journey with me. Let's get into the podcast. Before we get into some topics today, let's talk about what's in the news. Advancements in wearable devices are transforming psychiatric care by enabling real-time monitoring of psychological indicators related to mental health. Devices like smartwatches and specialized wristbands can track stress levels, sleep patterns, and other vital signs, allowing for early detection for mental health issues and timely interventions. This technology supports proactive mental health management, particularly in home-based care settings. So much of what people deal with between sessions can oftentimes just go unspoken. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody leave session and then email me saying, "Oh, I forgot to talk about this. Let's make sure we talk about it in the next meeting." As I've talked a little bit about before, the way people study has always been an interesting thing to me. I was never really taught to study when I was younger. I was taught to learn. And I don't know what that really meant when I think back. But, it was a lot of nights sitting at my kitchen table feeling like I had to pound information into my head. It really wasn't until like the tail end of undergrad that somebody actually cued me into learning types, learning styles. And it was something that I'd kind of heard about, like visual learners, auditory learners, things like that. But I'd never really understood how to leverage those different styles. So there are 4 major learning styles. First up, visual learners, people that retain information through seeing. These individuals can use things like color-coded notes, diagrams, mind maps, flashcards, watching educational videos, or use apps like Brainscape and Quizlet. Second up, you have auditory learners. These individuals learn best by hearing. They do things like try to record notes, record lectures, listening to podcasts, teach the content out loud, or discuss topics in a study group. Third is reading and writing learners. These people rewrite notes, summarize chapters, use written practice exams, create outlines or cue cards that they can flip through on a regular basis. And then lastly, you have kinesthetic learners. And these individuals learn by doing or moving. So they use like physical flashcards, they act out concepts, or they do different paces to their studying. They engage in hands-on practice or applying the information that they learn. I don't think that you have individuals that just utilize one of these types of learnings and that's going to be it. I think most of us, a majority of us, utilize a combination of all these learning styles. However, there might be one that you favor over the other. Like I talked about how one of the best ways that I learn is through listening. listening over and over again. That's why I created this podcast. So that tends to be the one that I lean into the most. But you can go to this free online quiz, VARK, VARK, and it'll give you your learning style. And then from that, you can kind of create a learning plan that can really help to help you learn. To imagine that we get a little extra data in between sessions to really personalize the experience, to really have something very significant and specific to talk about in each meeting, I can really see some potential here for just providing that higher level of care for individuals. Of course, this would have to be with their consent, but I can envision a whole different experience with therapy that has layers to it, layers that, might oftentimes get forgotten between the last meeting and the meeting before, ways to track individuals and certain things that they have going on in their lives to just enhance their care and get them to better outcomes. First topic we're going to go over is borderline personality versus bipolar II disorder. Let's open with a little vignette. Marisol is a 29-year-old woman who presents after her third ER visit in 2 months for suicidal ideation. She describes intense, unstable relationships and feelings of complete emptiness when she's alone. One moment she's euphoric and planning for a wedding, and the next she's cutting herself after a perceived rejection. She says, "People always leave me. I'm too much." 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with bipolar II, but states that the meds don't really help. "My mood changes within the same day," she says, "especially after an argument." So let's break this down a bit. Borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. It's rooted in relational instability, abandonment fears, and emotional dysregulation. You also see a lot of mood shifts, oftentimes, like really rapid mood shifts and a lot of reactivity. This is often tied to interpersonal dynamics. And this is also associated with identity disturbance, impulsivity, and chronic feelings of emptiness. On the other hand, bipolar II disorder involves episodic mood shifts, hypomania, major depression. They occur independently of relational triggers and persist for days, if not weeks. So on the exam, timing and interpersonal context are going to be complete giveaways for this one, right? Rapid changes in mood plus unstable self-image. It's going to equal borderline personality disorder versus episodic mood shifts with distinct periods of elevation or depression is probably going to be bipolar II, right? So for Marisol here, we're probably looking more at borderline personality. Next up, dual relationships versus boundary crossing. This is a fun one. All right, here's your vignette. A rural therapist is asked to attend a memorial service for a client's father. The client's family is prominent in the small town, and declining the invitation would be seen as disrespectful. The therapist worries it might impact rapport, but also wants to maintain ethical clarity. Later that week, the same therapist is asked to join a business venture by another client who's launching a wellness center. All right, what do you guys think? Just off the cuff. Okay, keep that in your head. Let's talk about and break this down. Remember, a dual relationship occurs when a therapist takes on another role, professional, financial, or social. That could impair objectivity or risk harm to the person that you're working with. Boundary crossing might be clinically appropriate if it serves therapeutic goals in cultural contexts, like attending a funeral or a memorial service, like that was talked about in that vignette. So the key points here is to ask yourself, is this harmful or exploitative or a conflict of interest? If yes, dual relationship is usually to be avoided. If no, and it supports rapport or cultural respect, possibly an acceptable boundary can be crossed here. Regardless of what happens with this, Documentation and supervision is going to be critical, right? Like you don't want to do this within a bubble. You want to make sure that you're talking to your supervisor about it. And you want to make sure that you're documenting everything, including post, like if you do go to the memorial service, post memorial service, kind of being able to document things. So, of course, staying away from the venture with the wellness center, that's going to be a conflict of interest. That's probably something you're going to avoid. How about ADHD versus trauma related attention difficulties? Okay, Marcus is age 10. He's brought in for an evaluation due to poor focus, difficulty sitting still, and trouble following directions. His teacher says he's always in his own world. At home, he's forgetful and irritable, has a history that reveals his mother was in and out of rehab and moved between multiple caregivers during childhood. So you hear the initial part of this vignette, right? And you probably are like leaning a lot more toward ADHD. But then you get some context here that the home life of this child wasn't always very accommodating, and it makes you think a bit. Remember, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental issue. It has symptoms that show up really early and impacts across all environments. Common signs include sustained inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Trauma-related attention issues may mimic ADHD but tend to be situational, tied to emotional dysregulation, hypervigilance, and triggers from adverse experiences. The key points here are to look for consistency versus context. So across all environments, since early childhood, ADHD, in specific settings, often tied to fear, chaos, and neglect, equals trauma. So we see Marcus having difficulty at school, having difficulty at home. So, it's across all the different environments this little guy is exposed to. Here's a fun one. CBT versus DBT versus ACT. A 23-year-old client presents with a history of depression and recent episodes of self-harm. She's overwhelmed by intense emotions and says, "I hate feeling this way, but can't make the thoughts stop." Another client, a 35-year-old executive, is dealing with high anxiety and perfectionism. He says, "I know my thoughts are irrational, but I can't stop thinking of them." All right, let's take a look at how these modalities might support these individuals. So, CBT helps clients identify and challenge distorted thoughts. It also helps change emotional and behavioral outcomes. DBT is tailored for emotional dysregulation and combines CBT with mindfulness, distress tolerance, and acceptance strategies. So I don't know if you know this, but DBT was originally created by Marsha Linehan to support individuals with borderline personality disorder, so that emotional and distress tolerance and emotional dysregulation strategies really are geared toward people that struggle with that personality disorder. ACT focuses on acceptance, not control of your thoughts or the way you see the situation. And this is encouraging clients to act according to values despite discomfort. So with ACT, you do a lot of values work initially. That's part of the foundational piece. I really like all three of these modalities. I oftentimes use them in concert with each other. They work really, really well together. But one of the common treatments with ACT, or one of the things you see a lot of the times, is treating things like trauma, chronic pain, and OCD, as well as anxiety. I used to use ACT a lot of times when I worked in the emotional or the eating disorder world. That was a big part of how we supported individuals in that environment. But some of the key points here: does the client need to analyze thoughts? That's going to be CBT. Does the person need to tolerate intense emotion and improve interpersonal skills? That's probably going to be best with DBT. Does the person need to accept distressing thoughts while pursuing values? That's ACT. All right. Next one. How about schizoaffective disorder versus mood disorder with psychotic features? Dion is 41 years old, has been hospitalized 3 times for severe depression episodes. During her most recent episode, she heard voices calling her worthless. She also describes a time between episodes where she still heard voices and felt like people were plotting against her, even though her mood was stable. Schizoaffective disorder involves an uninterrupted period of illness with major mood episodes plus psychotic symptoms, but there must be at least 2 weeks of psychosis without mood symptoms. Mood disorder with psychotic features has psychosis that occurs only during mood episodes, never independently. So the key point with this one is psychotic symptoms stand outside of mood episodes. That would be schizoaffective disorder. Psychotic symptoms that only show up with depression or mania is going to be mood disorder with psychotic features. Okay, how about we go over some questions that you might see on the NCE related to these topics. First up, a client presents with chronic feelings of emptiness, intense fears of abandonment, and a pattern of unstable relationships. She also reports frequent suicidal gestures when experiencing interpersonal conflict. What is most likely the diagnosis here? Major depressive disorder, bipolar II disorder, borderline personality disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder? The answer to this one is going to be C, borderline personality disorder. So you have some hallmark traits here: chronic emptiness, unstable relationships, fear of abandonment, and self-harm. This really points toward borderline personality disorder. Bipolar II would involve distinct mood episodes not directly tied to any interpersonal conflict. Question number 2. A therapist in a small rural town attends a client's father's funeral at the request of the family. What type of situation does this best illustrate? Would it be A, dual relationship, B, boundary violation, C, boundary crossing, or D, an ethical breach? Answer here is going to be C, boundary crossing. Boundary crossing may be clinically appropriate and culturally sensitive, unlike dual relationships, which is not inherently harmful if handled with care and transparency. Question number 3. What is a key diagnostic distinction between ADHD and trauma-related attention issues in children? A, trauma is diagnosed only when abuse has been confirmed. B, ADHD symptoms are limited to home environments. C, ADHD symptoms are chronic and appear across settings. Or D, trauma-related symptoms include hyperactivity across all settings. Answer to this one's going to be C, ADHD symptoms are chronic and appear across all the different settings. ADHD must be present in multiple environments and typically appear early in the child's life. Trauma symptoms are going to be more situational and vary by context, but they have a clear emotional and environmental trigger. Question number 4. A client with borderline personality disorder is struggling with emotional regulation and impulsivity. Which therapeutic approach would be most appropriate? A, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. B, solution-focused brief therapy. C, dialectical behavior therapy. Or D, cognitive processing therapy. Answer to this one's going to be C, dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. DBT is designed specifically for emotional dysregulation, and specifically was designed for people with borderline personality disorder. So this is going to be the best modality for this individual. Question number 5. A client has been experiencing auditory hallucinations both during depressive episodes and during periods when her mood is stable. What diagnosis is most appropriate? Would it be A, major depressive disorder with psychotic features, B, schizoaffective disorder, C, schizophrenia, Or D, bipolar I disorder? Answer here is going to be B, schizoaffective disorder. Psychotic symptoms occurring independently of mood episodes are key diagnosis for schizoaffective disorder. If hallucinations only occur during depressive episodes, the correct diagnosis would be major depressive disorder with psychotic features. And that is going to do it for the episode. Thank you so much for listening and sticking with me through this last year. It has really been something I've enjoyed, and I know I have not always been consistent. I'm really hoping to do better this year and keep up with this, make sure that this is a weekly podcast. I'm also working on some more things to just support learning, to help people both thrive toward taking these tests and then into their careers as therapists. So, I have some things that I'm hoping people can really look forward to. And hopefully by the end, probably of next month, you should see some new things that you can utilize toward learning and becoming a therapist. So until then, keep studying, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.